And there we go. Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Love First Christians Bible study. For this week, we just lost Ben, boy. But Ben will be here. I've got Aaron as per usual. Aaron, how are you doing today?
Everything's going fantastically.
Sounds good. Sounds good. Ben it says he's setting up his mic and cam. So we'll have Ben here in just a moment as well. And I am Hody Johns. And I guess with that introduced, we'll go ahead and talk about the readings for this week. Aaron, you only had one that you wanted to discuss this week, which is probably smart because the last few times we haven't gotten to like half of what you've wanted to get to.
But, yeah. I was gonna say I usually skip things like when we are actually doing it live because I'll write down like 8 things and we'll only get to like 3 or 4 of them.
Sure.
No, this time the only thing I had was a discussion between Jesus and his parents.
Mm-hmm.
It was in reference to the fact that he ditched his parents to go back to the temple and talk with the people that the priests there.
Yes.
Or the rabbis, I guess. It would be rabbis, wouldn't
it? Teachers, rabbis, yeah.
Yeah. But the idea of Jesus just not telling his parents that he was just gonna I'm peace out, I'm gonna dip, and like making them walk for days to get back to him. I mean, like literally, they didn't find him for 3 days, and he's a 12-year-old. I mean, like you at that point, you start wondering if your son is dead,
especially at that time, yeah.
Yeah, and
I guess this time too, yeah.
Yeah. I mean, like multiple. Yeah, your son disappears for 3 days, and you're super worried. That combined with our previous discussion of his family showing up to the place that he was worshiping at, or that he was proselytizing at, and him like being like, I don't have everyone's my family. These people aren't special. I first of all, I was like, why does Jesus treat his family like that? Because that's a conscious decision. That's not something that you just do absent-mindedly, especially since he's the Son of God.
Yeah.
And what does that have to say? Like, what does that tell us? Like, what can we extrapolate from that story? And then also, I had the thought of the Old Testament is so incredibly genealogically based, like lineage based. Everything is, X son of Y, Y son of Z, everything like that. And Jesus makes a distinct break from his family. Like, not in the sense that like he's, disowned his family or anything like that, but like he is distinct from the rest of his family. And I'm wondering, like, and then I thought about it more, and I was thinking, can I think of anybody in the New Testament that is like massively tied to their family lineage? And I couldn't come up with anybody. Like, I don't know if Paul, for instance, gets a Paul son of X, son of Y, that sort of thing. Jesus does, but it's almost feels incidental. Yeah, I was just curious of your thoughts about all that.
When I kid you not, when I read this passage this week, I was like, this is going to have Aaron thinking. I literally thought this in my head. I was like, Aaron's going to be like, this is Jesus once again being like dense to make a point, right? Like with the people outside the house again, like just being like, don't, oh, it's your mom and your family's here. It's like, well, everybody is my family. It's like, okay, do you want me to get the door or not? Now this is a little less funny, right? Because, well, that one, it's like, okay, you're being a little dense, but it's like kind of funny. Obviously, I can just open the door and let them in. He just straight up kind of goes missing. So there is all right. So the context of this is he's going to get what is essentially his bar mitzvah, right? He's 12.
Right.
So he's going to the temple. He is supposed to be there at that time. And then he hangs behind longer. They're part of a caravan, as again, during the time period, it's safety in numbers. You know, you want to travel with people. If you're traveling alone, you're subject to thieves on the roads, you know, so they're traveling in a caravan. So it takes them a while to get back to them, even when they guess correctly where he is. It's like, okay, the fact that we know he's not there, I can't just walk across the street and get him, because of course that's why we're traveling in caravans. I don't want to get robbed. I don't want to get killed. There's bad people on the roads. Sexual assault, obviously, at that time period, especially for the occupying Romans attempting to kind of breed out some of the Jews, right? These are things that we have to worry about. And so it's a pretty serious inconvenience that Jesus stays behind and does that. And of course he's like, well, why did you think I would be anywhere except my Father's house? Now, in a sense, that makes sense. That's where they left him. So I guess, like, when you realize, like, where is he, it's kind of like Home Alone, right? Like, he's likely at home. And Ben's back. Hey, Ben, we are talking about Jesus hanging at
I can hear you.
Oh, okay, cool.
Yeah.
Cool. So it's kind of like, why is why would he be this dense to the point of making his mom make another trip to make some point about just being like, I belong at my Father's house, which is, I would say, probably the point, right? Is that he's like, hey, this is my calling. This is where I'm supposed to be, is at my Father's house. And so you shouldn't necessarily question why I'm here or what all's going on. But yeah, it is an extreme way to make a point when his parents have to go out of his way to do that. I will go ahead and I don't have a profound answer for this, Aaron. It is obviously, I could give you the typical evangelical Christian response, which is just how hardcore Jesus was about it, that this was my home and I feel more at home here than anywhere else. And you should all, like, yes, it's a profound way to make the point, but that's the thing. It's a profound way to say it. And maybe that's just what hammers it home best. Maybe Ben's got a better answer for this than me. I am kind of with you in that it seems a little dense. I do think, I'm not saying that it's a problem, because I do think that, like I said, God works in mysterious ways, and maybe this profound point really hits it home for somebody out there to be like, wow, that's how close Jesus was to God, that he just felt like he wasn't apart from his family, even though his mom and dad had left, and that's saying something. But from the human standpoint, absolutely, you freaked your parents out, and there's no reason you can't just really say, like, "Hey, mom and dad, I'm going to stay here for a few days because this is where I, feel most connected to everybody." Ben, what are some of your thoughts about this?
I think I'm going to pass on this one.
Ben, you are muted.
No, he's not muted.
I'm here.
Oh, no, I can't hear.
Yeah, you can't hear him, maybe?
Ben, you go ahead and talk. I will fix things on my end.
Okay. I'm passing on this one, man. I didn't really stew on that one. I was busy on the Book of Numbers. Meditating on the Book of Numbers this week. With my brain, I could only handle a certain amount at one time. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, I hear you. I just don't know what that was.
That was weird. I was just saying that I kind of passed on this one because I focused on thinking about the Book of Numbers this week. I'm not one of those people that can handle too much, so I focused on Numbers. Fair enough.
I mean, Aaron, obviously you're the one who thought about it. Did you have any? Obviously, you're the one that's astonished about it. So I guess turning the question back to you is a little Aristotelian.
So we discussed I got the impression from what you were already saying. Like, what you said was basically the impression I got, was that the intended message is Jesus he feels at home in God's temple, and that it was just a brazen way of making the point. But it just felt so disconnected from, like, if you're supposed to love your neighbor and whoever you do the least of these you do to me and all that kind of stuff, being so pointlessly inconsiderate of his parents just really irks me, and because of the issue that we already had brought up in relation to him treating his parents when they came to visit him. That just like the combination of the two makes it a pattern, and I just don't understand the pattern. But also, I was curious of your thoughts about what I said before about the breaking of the Old Testament being so lineage based, and everybody's son of, with Jesus, who's like, yeah, those are my parents, but I don't really talk to them anymore. You know?
Yeah, I've said this before, but like there is definitely a it's funny because we just read actually today in Luke, we just got that long lineage, blank son of blank, blank son of blank, blank son of blank.
Endless lineage.
Endless lineage. Now here's the thing, within all this, there are halves, there are steps, there are adopteds, and then there's Joseph, who is not the biological father of Jesus Christ, right? But again, where do human minds care about this, lineage? We care about like all this biology, and yet Jesus comes from this mixed family tree, adopted into this, coming from here. And then, of course, by the time Jesus is old enough to preach, he is like, yeah, all that stuff kind of doesn't matter. And I like that we get Luke's perspective. Luke actually does the best work as far as the pre-ministry part of Christ's life. We have one of my favorite Bible verses of all here, and we will get to that in a moment. But the fact that Jesus and John are just kind of like that heritage stuff, guys, we're done. And thank goodness, because it makes the reading a nightmare. But also from like a real standpoint, we are all children of God. We actually had a story in Numbers this week where foreigners, it's like, yeah, you want to be Jewish? Go ahead, get adopted into the thing. And the people were like, no, this can't be. They did not come from one of my people. And God's like, no, we're not doing that. Another story this week about the women who had their no brothers, and their father dies. And it's like, what happens to his land? And God is like, yeah, of course you get the land. What do we be? Like, you cannot be this stupid. And the people are, of course, like, what, women owning property? That can't be. God's like, yes, they can own property. They're people, all right? Like relax a little. So God is definitely pulling in that direction. Yeah.
I do have a quick thought on what Aaron was saying about Jesus. It is interesting to me. I had to get my brain in gear here. It is interesting to me how Jesus did do that to his parents, and I've heard all types of arguments trying to work through that, because it says later on in the scriptures that he never sinned. He's sinless. So is that the sinless part the God part of him, but the man part did something, and then no, because then that would mess up the cross. So in other words, he had to have been sinless. There was no ands, ifs, or buts about it. Jesus was a sinless man, God man. And it just, although what he did was rude and I think disrespectful, I agree with you. As a 12-year-old boy, it wasn't sin. And I find that interesting, because here's, growing up in a strict environment where children have to obey. If they don't say yes, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, whatever, you don't, if you're told to jump, you say how high, if you say sit, how hard. And so it's interesting that a mind of a young man does not finish developing till he's 25 years of age. And that is when the brain actually starts to finish developing. And guys don't really start maturing until about 30. I mean, let's just face it. The guys don't really start turning into mature young men until about the age of 30. The age of 20 to 30 is, it's a miracle they get kept alive. And, oh my, I got a son turning 21 tomorrow. Oh, Lord help me. But it's, I don't know. I'm finding this interesting how he did clearly do something that we would consider a disobedience. And, hey, Bray, he would consider disobedience and would consider sin, and we would, and yet it wasn't. And I've been really trying to change my parenting from the strict environment that I grew up in, the strict environment that I've observed all around me, to being gentle parenting. And it's been a lot of work because you're trying to remove fundamentalism, remove legalism, remove harshness from your entire concept of thinking when you're dealing with children, and realize that their brains are developing, and all they are, children are literally just puppets, and they just parrot their parents, they just parrot what they observe and what they're taught, because their mind is developing and they're learning. So I just find it so interesting that what Jesus did was not sin, even though in our realm, in the world that I grew up in, that would have been considered sin.
Yeah, I think you've kind of opened up this idea of Jesus is genuinely, if he genuinely believes he is with family all the time, then this is 2 for 2, Aaron, to answer your question on the last issue that we had, that he really genuinely does not see a distinction between like Mary and Joseph and the common people at the temple, you know? Now he seems to be aware of his mother. I point this out when like he's on the cross, you know, and ask for his mother and make sure she's taken care of and everything. But maybe that's just like a familial obligation that he wants to make sure is taken care of, but he feels that obligation for kind of everybody. It's just he wants to be a good example to other people who have that. Alex, I hope you are here. I see the soothing driving pattern in the background.
Yeah, it's like we're
kind
going
of
to put us to sleep driving with the shadows.
Yeah.
I'm driving.
Oh, it's all good, man. Do you have any thoughts about Jesus kind of staying behind at the temple and kind of putting his family in distress? That's what we're talking about right now.
I mean, not necessarily. Don't really have much that I can think of about the subject, because it's like something I kind of understood as like a necessity on Jesus' end. Like his family kind of like, sure, put them in distress, but at the end of the day, his family kind of understood that that was what was going to end up happening. The cross, all that stuff was just going to happen at some point. Like Mary knew the moment she ended up having Jesus that she was going to have to sacrifice a lot. But I don't fully know how it worked back then. But like, I can only imagine like maybe in a different age, like the 1950s or something, where you know family is more of like seen as a traditional thing, and it's like maybe she wouldn't have been understanding if it was like the 1950s, and it's like, you know, you can only sacrifice because we allow you to, not because you want to. And
There's an entire demographic of people that are still very much like the 1950s. German Baptist, Amish, Hutterites, Independent Fundamental Baptists. There's groups of them, Gothard groups. I mean, we're talking that represents hundreds of thousands of people that actually believe what you just mentioned, Alex.
Yeah, I've bumped into the Amish a lot here in my part of Ohio, because I only live like 30 minutes to an hour, depending on where I am, from the Amish.
Okay, cool.
So I can definitely see like the Amish being 1950 styles.
Aaron and I at his book club, we read which was it Bookchin? It was the Bookchin book, right? With the Hopi Indians, Aaron.
Yes.
What was it called? Do you remember the name of that?
Ecology of Freedom.
The Ecology of Freedom. There you go. So there actually has been a functional society that sees all children as family. For those who are familiar with the Hopi Native Americans, I did not know this, but they actually like from birth are like, they're all your kids, right? Like everybody's kids are your kids.
Takes a village.
That whole concept, they were actually relatively successful, have a good community. Obviously, were genocided out of existence by a combination of other factors, but it is that their parenting style is not what led to their downfall. So it is possible to at least have that. Ben, you said you were kind of in Numbers this week. Did you have a passage from Numbers that you wanted to discuss?
My.
Maybe a couple.
I actually found myself just kind of pouring in. I wrote some notes in my scribe. One of the things that really leaped out to me reading through Numbers this week, I actually listened to it all today on audio on the free audio online. You can get the NLT BibleStudyTools.com. You can listen to it online for free. And so I was listening to numbers being read. And one of the things you brought it up, one of the things about the daughters going, hey, dad died, but he died because he sinned, but it wasn't the same sin as Korah. And it's like, man, people died quite a bit back then for doing for sinning. Makes you wonder what his sin was. But one of the things I really noticed was the incredible amount of misogyny against women. And that's where you realize that these books were definitely written in the tribal from tribal groups. Women were simply property. I mean, even in I forget the passage. I apologize, Hody. I forgot to write down the passages. But
You're
the one that I thought about that blew me away was that a wife or a daughter could make a vow, and the husband or the father could disavow the vow from the woman. I mean, that just blows my mind. Took away all their dignity. And how you go to the New Testament and there's neither male nor female. There's neither Jew nor Greek. We're all just one before Christ. And how Jesus literally destroyed that patriarchy that just seeps through here in the book of Numbers and all throughout the Old Testament. But anyway, that one really leaped out to me. I guess I never see. It's so funny. I'm in the deconstructing stage. Been telling you guys. I am deconstructing, and I think I'm starting to reconstruct. Like doing this Bible study and being able to do it. This is my third week. I actually look forward to it. That's a big step for me. But I'm looking at these passages of Scripture. My fiance asked me the other night. She goes, "Are you seeing things differently?" And I'm like, "Oh my word, yes." It's like I see things I never. It's just from a total different. It's like the veil's been lifted from my eyes, and I'm seeing things from such an incredibly different view. But the other story was the story of Balaam, and I don't know. I never noticed this before. Is how Balaam was not a Jew, from what I can tell, but yet he was a follower of God. It makes you wonder how many people were. And I don't think Job was a Jew. Was the book of Job? I don't know if Job was a Jew. Now that I think about it, but makes you wonder how many people. You got the order of Melchizedek. He talked about in Hebrews. He wasn't a Jew, and yet he followed God. And it just makes you wonder how many people actually follow God that are never talked about, never mentioned, because the focus is on just one group of people that started with just a man and his wife, and all the way through. This is just the soap opera. It's the days of our lives of the Israeli people, all from beginning all the way to Jesus. And one of the things that leaps out to me on this, and man, you're just gonna have to shut me up, Odie, because I've really been thinking of all this. Is one of the things that just really stuck to me is we've got to be careful when we're not to take this literally, and also understand this is a story about a family, and that we shouldn't be making doctrines out of this, because this is literally the story of one family throughout the entire Old Testament. But anyway, the story of Balaam really fascinated me as I realized, he is not a Jew. And the one thing is, the last thing I'll point out that I really just stuck to me was God told him, okay, you are not allowed to curse Israel. You're not even allowed to go with, I think it was Balak's men, or I'm losing track here, but then he said, so then he goes the next day. One very screwed up family, man. You ain't good.
Frey says one very, very, very screwed up family. Yeah.
He goes the next day, and now God's angry because he went. But literally the night before, while everyone's sleeping, God told him to go. So to me, that's literally confliction of that. God literally changed his mind in just a matter of nighttime to morning. That one blew me away.
I actually pointed this out in the Discord this week that Balaam says, "Oh God," or Balak Balaam, yeah, says that God never changes his mind. And like
Right.
in that chapter, he changes his mind. Like
He
we're
changes-
told with the words, God changed his mind. Like it's happened. I mean, we've been all reading together, or
Yes.
most of us or whatever. God's changed his mind 20 plus, 30 plus points at this time. I mean, it's
But see,
with that verbiage. So
but
the
see, I
idea.
come from this world, Hody,
Go ahead.
where
Yeah.
God never changed. I mean, I heard from the pulpit, I will not change. I will not change. I heard that literally. If I had a penny for every time I heard that from the pulpit, I would be as rich as Elon Musk. And so I mean, it's not, but it's not shattering my faith. And
Sure.
in fact, it's hard to explain, but I'm no longer afraid of it. I'm like, okay, yeah, God literally can change his mind, which now makes more sense of why we would pray in the first place.
Yeah.
Because God can and will change his mind.
There's an idea that God doesn't change, and that this is the humans perceive God as changing his mind based on the courses of these events. But regardless, it comes across as God changing his mind. And if that's the way it seemed to them, then there's no reason why it shouldn't seem that way to us, for us to be able to bring, God something like that. Aaron pointed out Jesus with who heals the woman who's like, please heal me. And he's like, you're not my people. Right. Like, and they're like, even dogs can get scraps from our tables here. And then Jesus changes his mind and chooses to bless her. Now, is Jesus actually changing his mind, or is he just providing? I believe that he is making an example for the apostles in that situation. But regardless, we have a change of course. I've recommended over and over. It actually just got released on Audible, I think recently, but The Widening of God's Mercy for those who have issues with homosexuals, from the leading to New Testament and Old Testament scholars. I'd say alive. Unfortunately, one of them just passed a few months ago. But like, it doesn't, like, we call it the widening of God's mercy because that's how it seems to us. You also, I'm going to try to kind of bring in everything that you talked about here when you talked about women in the scriptures and how God is pulling them one way. Yeah, God's word never changes. We have verses just side by side that don't make any sense together. It frankly does. If God grants us free will, God's mind changes with each and every decision we make, says Bray, and I agree with him. Bray says, as the resident fanboy, I want to point out that St. Nicodemus dedicated his life to removing gender from the rabbinical law. We have here, I'm going to go ahead and put this up on screen. I want to make sure this looks right. There we go. This is the any cause divorce, in case you hear about this in the theological perspective. That in Deuteronomy, now we haven't got there yet, but Ben is mentioning, kind of something in this same vein, that if a guy wants to divorce his wife, he can divorce her for any cause. Some indecency, doesn't need to specify, just doesn't like her for some reason. And Jesus specifies, no, she has to have either committed adultery or violated your marriage contract, whatever it was that you set up. Now, for most people, the marriage vows, we vow to love each other, sickness and health. So if somebody's like, hey, you're ill and I don't want to stay with you anymore, they violated the contract, so you can be free. When we talk about this, I unfortunately see some people keeping, and unfortunately this is making the rounds these days, that there are people keeping women and children in abusive relationships. And men, I mean, frankly, keeping them in abusive relationships because they think adultery is the only reason. Adultery is a necessary violator of the contract, but you can violate the terms of your marriage contract. So when you make those marriage vows to one another, if you break those, you are free to divorce the other person. I have to bring this up because the primitive church granted these kind of divorces, and for some reason we in the modern era think they didn't, like because Jesus was saying adultery is the only reason. It is vastly out of sync with what we're taught here. But the overturning of the any cause divorce was for safety for women. Jesus actually makes that explicit when he does this. It's like you just cast her out in the streets and you get to be free to marry somebody else whenever you feel like it, and this is not right. And again, with God changing his mind, we have a policy, which is you get to leave your wife for any reason. And Jesus literally says, God allowed you to do that because your hearts were so hard and you wouldn't have accepted him otherwise. So we have God actually giving us a rule in Deuteronomy, and several in Numbers as well, and then being like, that rule is bad. I gave it to you because you were fallen people and you required some bad rules. Otherwise you would just all turn from the faith. Right. Like, and so yes, I permitted some bad rules to go around, but Jesus has no problem calling them bad rules. We've already identified, as been reading through the Gospels, Jesus is breaking many of the rules we are literally reading at the same time, in these Old Testament.
He broke them right and left.
Right.
I think he did it on purpose.
Right. What's the purpose of violating the law? Right. Like, what is the purpose of the law? Are you keeping the spirit of the law? Or are you keeping the letter of the law? If you try to keep the letter of the law, good luck, because it contradicts itself. Aaron, let's get your thoughts on kind of Ben brought up a lot here.
I'm sorry, man. I spent time in it.
one more thing before I turn to Aaron. You are absolutely correct. Job was an Uzite, I believe, right, from Uz. So yeah, not there. And all of these people are Semitic. As some people will actually note, like the current conflict in Palestine right now, they are also Semites involved. The Canaanites were Semitic. So when we have this leftover people that worship still the Jewish God, yes, they just didn't go with they didn't go with the caravan to Joseph down to Egypt. They stayed. So there actually are Jews in the region. We're not calling them Jews because they didn't get to be part of the official 12 tribes or 14 tribes or whatever. But yeah, there are actual Jews.
They're
in
all
that
cousins,
region.
basically.
Right. They're all related. And boy, oh boy, does the Old Testament make sure we know it, that they are all related, even as they are mating. Aaron, any thoughts on the stuff that Ben brought up there?
Well, it's not directly related to what Ben brought up, and it's the same drum beat that I've been beating on for like 10 weeks in a row as it relates to the Old Testament. But man, oh man, every single time I think it's the last time that we're going to read about the Israelites betraying God. Like, these are the same people that have been led out of slavery, that have been given food from the heavens so often that it like becomes normal to them and they don't even see it as a miracle anymore. That have been like parting the Red Sea and like everything. And then we read two more stories today of like, the first one was being like temporarily inconvenienced by not having water, and like God's already regularly provided water on a regular basis. And what I didn't really understand about that story, though, in this particular area, was it wasn't clear how Aaron and Moses screwed up, because the people, like rebelled against Aaron and Moses, and then God chastised Aaron and Moses. And I kept rereading it several times because I was like, where did Aaron and Moses mess up? Because it didn't look like they did. And it was a relatively short passage. And I was wondering if like text was excised, like explaining how they were responsible for it. Because like the people rebelled against them, and then immediately they went to the temple and they were like, God, what should we do about this situation? And he's like, well, I'm going to punish you now for not fulfilling your duty or whatever.
I can give you the typical theological answer, and that's he struck the rock with the
there you go, struck
with the staff, which is not what God asked. And in a way, now this gets interpreted different ways. One is that Moses is like kind of power hungry and being like, I want people to see me as like the leader or whatever. And so he struck the staff with the rock to make it give water, to make it look like it came from him instead of that. However, this is further clarified later on that Jesus, I'm sorry, not Jesus, well, kind of Jesus, but God is actually upset with them because they didn't just have the faith as well, that they went back before God. This is actually a time that you could argue they get in trouble for praying, but that Moses like, you're going to let us die. And God's like, I haven't let you die so far, right? Like, so you are just joining them in the sense that you feel the need to approach me to intercede because you believe I'm allowing you to die of thirst. I have not allowed that. I will not allow that. And yet here you are showing up on behalf of the people who say that I will. So it's essentially giving that like into their mindset. Yes, exactly. Alex, any thoughts about all that? Sorry, I should have given you more warm-up time. There you go.
Yeah, I'm driving, so it's a little, I mean, I'm also in a state where you're not allowed to drive and be on your phone at the same time, so whatever.
Be careful.
But I can kind of see the argument that Moses is a little power hungry because he felt kind of a need to be, in some ways, I'd say maybe a vigilante. Kind of gave me like Daredevil vibes or something like that. Like he was trying to do what's right, but he was also willing to harm his opponents in the end. Like he was willing to take down those Roman guards as kind of almost a show of power to the Jews that were slaves. Like we can beat back our enemies.
Any other thoughts about like what Ben said about like women and inequality and people who are outside of the Jewish caste, I guess, and their
And don't forget the slavery that was
world.
encouraged.
Slavery? Yeah.
Honestly, it kind of feels like, well, in some ways it may have not been as bad as now, but like it kind of reminds me a little bit of like America, you know, where we almost basically had our own caste system, even if it wasn't official. Like the slaves were put at the bottom. The people who were natives to the area were put at the bottom. Women were treated as second class to men.
Yep.
And so it kind of feels like you could say the United States, even though it was a capitalist society, with Christianity had its own caste system, kind of like India does.
Yeah. I mean, it's when we read The Guarded Gate, it was there. You had these eugenicists propping up Bostonians as like the perfect genetic peoples, and I that sounds sarcastic, but that's literally like 100 years ago from today. We were like mainstream science was promoting that Bostonians were the purest of all pure racials, people, and that we should all allow them to breed and cut off breeding ourselves. That way, the most pure, whatever. Yeah. You say maybe it hasn't been official. It is definitely beneficial in some cases. I mean, let's be honest. When we look at Jim Crow and legal systems, some people have absolutely been regarded as
Yeah, I mean, like,
Yeah.
I guess like it hasn't been official in like the straight up sense, like it's a caste system. Like, I guess it's beneficial in like more sneaky, snaky, slithery kind of like ways that the corruption in our republic has.
I get what you mean. Alex, did you have any thoughts about the like either the reading this week or anything going on your mind while we're talking, or?
Not necessarily. I kind of just been listening, and I kind of think it's like good to hear other people's perspectives, and it's nice to still see that this community is able to like help people reconstruct and deconstruct the Bible when needed, and kind of, I guess, put together their faith and kind of understand and grasp things.
Yeah, it's been a really cool community. We've had our last couple of weeks have been A+. I think we're kind of hitting a really good stride here. Alex, I know you said like you kind of had a heck of a day today. Is there anything we can help you with to make it better? You happy to be here?
So yesterday was my birthday, and it also marked, basically yesterday was my birthday, and then I also got let go from my job and lost my relationship within one day.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, apparently she wanted to get back together with her ex. I guess she was not ready to break up with her ex or whatever, and then my job determined that I was a liability because I struggled to physically handle lifting a lot of large objects often. You know, like 8 hours a day, mostly lifting large like furniture. And so there went my job that had a guaranteed, even though it was more like an hourly job, it had benefits that were better than teachers. It had about $17 an hour in pay almost. And it allowed me to get out of work almost 30 minutes early every day. And I didn't have to work Sundays. And then poof, it's gone.
Man, so of the three most negative things that can impact your mental health, you just went ahead and checked off two of them within like 24 hours.
Well, and then I checked off another one of them twice because technically I've broken up with 2 people this month. So it's like huge oof.
Man, well, I am so sorry. That is, there is nothing I having gone through it and having seen other people go through it, I hate that the best advice that there is just like, give it time. because it feels like you're underwater, and it's like, oh yeah, just give it time. And when you're like breathing in water, that's not helpful advice. And so all I can do is kind of offer like my sympathies. I don't have, outside of like official therapy and grief counseling and everything like that, but it's just really hard, man. And
Yeah. Leaning on my,
obviously, you know, the Lord's in control and everything like that, but it's just, you know, these times suck. They suck, you know. Jesus wept. Jesus gets grieved. So it's not like knowing that it gets better later. I mean, Jesus was even in his weeping about to resurrect the person that he's weeping for, and yet still weeps. And so, like, even if you knew that things were going to get better tomorrow, you should still grieve. The
yeah.
perfect man still grieves. Sorry, I'm interrupting you. Go ahead.
No, yeah, I agree. Like, I've been leaning mainly on my Christian communities and stuff to kind of get answers, and I've thankfully not been getting just the whole, you know, stereotypical cookie cutter answers that they give you. Like, I've been getting actual deep answers from people and like good advice.
Yeah, well, good. I mean, I hope that we can provide. I hope that other people can provide. I appreciate you being willing to. I think it's tough to open up yourself when you are already in pain. You know, to be like, look at this bullet wound, kind of thing. You know, but I know it helps other people that have gone through this before to know that they're not alone. I mean, this kind of started a couple weeks ago where we had people talking about, you know, sexual assault that they've received. And it's like that opening of the door allowed more and more and more people to talk about it. There's a lot of people going through or who have gone through what you're going through. And it is not the two most distressing things that have happened in my life are a breakup and losing of a job. And that
Same here.
drove me right to the brink of suicide. So I am sorry you are going through them. Go ahead, Ben.
It's a feeling of helplessness. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, I just was.
Yeah, I've been there
Alex,
before, too,
man,
with the,
I feel for you,
feeling
brother.
suicidal in the past couple.
Yeah. Are you feeling suicidal like currently, or are you still, or at least you getting enough support from your Christian
No.
community to feel okay right now?
I've been feeling better and stuff. Like, I've talked it through with the woman that I was supposed to be dating. Like, it was kind of awkward. Both of our families thought we were dating yesterday, and this morning we're not. So it's kind of awkward. Like, I had already, like, I met her parents and everything on Monday. She was supposed to meet my family soon, and then we kind of just head first rushed into it when she wasn't ready, and then I didn't even know she wasn't ready and stuff. And so, you know, it happens sometimes. And then with the job, it was not 100% unexpected, but I didn't really get any indications. And then I kind of just was told, you got to leave, get your stuff. Today's your last day. HR will email you. And I just got a cookie cutter email from HR that basically said, we enjoyed having your time and we'll pray for you and your future endeavors. Although I didn't have a Christian, my direct boss isn't Christian, so I guess it was a little ironic that I got a prayer-filled message from someone else. Like,
Yeah. Man, I'm sorry. Aaron, you got any words of support?
It always it's so rough to get laid off. I've been laid off the last 3 jobs that I worked at prior to this one, the one that I'm working at right now, and yeah, it doesn't get any easier every single time. Especially since I was born and raised on the idea that you work for a job for 50 years, you retire, you get the golden pocket watch and a pension, and you you know, like this mentality and this mythos that doesn't exist and has never existed for anyone in our generation. But I still had that idea that, like, if you're loyal to a company, they'll be loyal back to you, and that is so not true. And people wonder why people job hop, you know, constantly, you know, every couple of years jump to a new job, and that millennials have no loyalty. It's because loyalty is not rewarded.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I sometimes feel that like with Gen Z and stuff, it's like, the end of Gen Z is still in high school, but it's like they're struggling just the same. Even Gen Alpha is probably going to have that problem, and it does
Yeah.
feel like a struggle for loyalty because I once went into a Aldi's for a job like interview, and there were probably 20 applicants and only 2 open positions. And I go back another time, and they're still trying to hire people, and it's like horrible. Like you see all these people, diverse age, race, whatever, trying to all fight for the same low-paying, same job just because it pays $15 an hour or more than $15 an hour, and they hire like nobody, and still keep looking for applicants, and it it just shows. And then a lot of jobs also list themselves as being seasonal or part-time, and then they don't hire, or they post fake job hirings just to let people in the company know that they're hiring for a position.
Yeah, I've definitely had Aaron. I know you and I could both relate to this. Applying to a position that isn't actually there, but I'm so glad I spent all that time and polished everything up and submitted all that paperwork and everything for. And they're like, "Oh, we always leave that open. It just always says we're hiring, but we're never
Yeah.
actually."
Thanks a lot.
Please,
Yeah.
please submit your resume, and then once you submit your resume, you get to the next page, and it's asking you to type in everything from your resume and manually.
I had that happen to me before. I applied for a job that I already had skills in and stuff, and I thought, this will be a good meantime job. And I was technically referred by a community partner of the nonprofit in question, and I go to apply just to find out that none of the positions on their website are available. They've already filled them. They just forgot to take them down. And they gave me a consolation prize with the like basically a 1-year contract with AmeriCorps as a consolation prize to work for them. And they technically hadn't hired for one position, and by the time I left, the other position was available, but my boss didn't want to hire. And I was like, well, that's the way the cookie crumbles. The positions end up opening up at some point.
Yeah. I'm sorry, man. Like I said, I keep leaning on us. Any way we can support you, let us know. We're if some conversation tonight makes it better, then I'm glad for that. But yeah, I'm sorry, man. It's those are stressful things, and we'll be praying for you and wishing you the best. Bray says if God grants us free will, God's mind changes with each and every decision we make. And then Jesus says, I gave you low expectations because you were horrible people. Now you're just bad people. So here's some higher expectations.
I busted out laughing.
And then Sanhedrin, nail him up. That's enough of that. Calling us to a higher standard. How dare you? All right. I had a couple passages that I really liked. So one of my favorites just personally is Balaam and the donkey. And it's a fun, cute story. I mean, essentially that there is an angel in the path with a sword who is like, you shall not pass. And this animal can see angels. I guess apparently that's something animals can do, and sees this angel. And it's like, I don't want to get my person killed. So I'm going to not go past this. And Balaam, every time the animal won't go, beats his donkey. And then finally, God, we're told, loosens. I love the way this is phrased, but basically allows the animal to speak, loosens his tongue. And the donkey's like, hey, have I ever steered you wrong before? Have I ever been bad just for no reason or whatever? And he's like, no, you haven't. And he's like, don't you think there's a good reason I'm doing this? And then finally, God makes the angel visible even to Balaam or whatever, and then chastises him for being like, man, you need to trust people.
So I do have a squirrel question, but
Yeah.
do you think that passage maybe influenced the movie Shrek? A donkey being able to have his tongue loosened and talk?
Possibly being ridden by an absolute ogre who needs to have a change of heart. Possible. So the donkey is a good donkey, right? And the lesson here is that it's listen, we see this later with Thomas and stuff, but you're not going to be able to see everything. There's not camcorders set up every which way. But there does come some point that you need to be able to trust the people who have your best interests at heart. And if they've proven to have your best interests, I don't want people being too trusting, but if they've proven to actually have your best interests at heart, you got to give them a little bit here, right? This also opens up another thing. If you have ever had the wonder here, in truth, me being a hardcore Christian, like, in college and going through all that, I always thought the idea of your pet going to heaven is cute, but there's odds are good that animals don't have souls. And but like, I didn't want to, exclaim that from the rooftops because, that would make me feel bad. But overwhelmingly, as we examine the scriptures, there is more evidence that animals get to heaven than human beings. Animals absolutely do go to heaven. They absolutely have souls. They absolutely have some uniqueness and God-breathed features about them, and we will see them again. That is not something that I say. Again, I was the pessimist for the longest time. It was like, that's just a really nice thing that you say to people. But overwhelmingly, when we look at the scriptures, when we get visions of heaven and the animals there, or whether we, in lessons like this, we talk about Balaam's donkey, like, animals do go to heaven. And so, I don't know, it's a cuter passage. There's not like any serious theological implications that people would get at it who wouldn't know. Bray is right. This is from the Bible as well. Who knows whether a man's soul ascends to heaven or the animal's soul descends into the earth? Like, the animals just disappear. That is not the way it works. That the animal's soul, them saying, "Oh, we go to heaven," the animals descend into earth. It's pleasant to think about sometimes because we can be really cruel to animals, and we want to think of them as beneath us or within our dominion. And so when they die, their time is over and they've served their utilitarian purpose. But it's not how it is. When we do have dominion over them, but that's a responsibility for them. Remember that this is another soul, that these are gentle, wonderful creatures of ours. It's okay to eat meat. Obviously, that's in the Bible, but we need to be kind to these animals. We need to understand, them and be better to them. So I think, there's the animal activist side, then there's the animals in heaven side. And yeah. Anybody, any thoughts on Balaam and the donkey? No? Aaron shakes his head no.
I've actually struggled over if it is true that the donkey talked, or is this more of like folklore that got written down. But do I believe that the donkey saw an angel of what? Yeah, I can see that. And I don't know, I'm still struggling on that one. Is it real, or is it a symbolism or something? Are we missing something in the story because we're taking it too literally? I don't know. I'm still stewing on that one. I'm not 100% on it.
So I tend to believe it's real, and simply because the donkey talks the way like a dog would. Like, if you were to hit a dog, the dog would be like, "Why are you doing that?" Right? Like, and that's kind of the way.
That is true.
I think if the donkey were to give a profound, like, "Let me explain to you the philosophy of we, the animal people," then it would be like, okay, this is maybe allegorical.
The serpent did talk to Eve and Adam and Eve. So yeah,
it's possible. Alex, any thoughts there? Again, I didn't give you any heads up, but yeah, you are still muted if you are trying to talk. But if not, that's okay too. What should I say?
I haven't made it. My signal's kind of wonky because I'm driving, but
you're okay.
I mean, it kind of takes me back, I guess. Like, when I've heard people like get sad about their animals passing away, or the idea of it, and there is someone that says, "Hate to break it to you, but pastoral ministry major or pastor here or whatever, your dog isn't going to heaven." And now it's like, as we've been more delving into these studies and stuff, I'm kind of like learning these things I didn't necessarily learn, because plenty of people grow up not really knowing what the Bible really means because they never really got the chance to properly read it. It's like, I didn't know until I was almost 21 that there was a witch in the Bible named the Witch of Endor. And it's like eye-opening to kind of look at some of this stuff. Like, I genuinely believe that, the idea that dogs don't go to heaven. And it's like, I remember that's why Kevin Smith ended up leaving Catholicism and no longer beliefs and religion. It just kind of caught my attention, like much we've been talking about, like the possibility that animals go to heaven. It's like that kind of makes complete sense because God found some value in the animals. Like, you know, growing up, we thought that animals only got prominence when they were sacrificed by like other religions, and that other than that, animals had no real prominence in the Christianity beyond the one story of Abraham.
Yeah.
But now, as we read more into this, it turns out it's more than just a goat or a sheep getting sacrificed for Abraham's kid.
Yeah. Bray agrees with it, says The Witch of Endor is one of my favorite passages. Lots of hearts there. I can't wait to get to that. The last time I read it, I didn't really understand it. And so I'm excited to read it again with the Love First Christians. So Bray and Alex, I'm sure you guys will be able to help guide me towards better understanding of that one there. Traditionalist Transsexual says, hey, sorry I'm late. That's okay. We're just happy to have you whenever we have you. And I appreciate you being here. The only other Bible verse I had before we move on, again, is rather simple, but I think that it is profoundly important and timely. And this is in Luke again, who did his homework. There is an argument that none of the Gospels were eyewitness accounts. At the very least, 3 of them probably are not. And Luke is definitely not. He tells you at the very beginning, he's like, I showed up, I interviewed the people who had something to say about it, something to do with it. I tried to figure out everything here as best that I could. And here's what I can comfortably tell you that I feel happened. So Luke is thankfully does the work of telling people, I think, being the one gospel writer where he doesn't pretend that he was there the whole time. Not that the others pretend. I don't want to say that they're liars or anything, but being the one guy who is writing it using the framework of being like, I just did a lot of research. I'm the investigatory journalist person. I know he was a doctor by profession, but doing this because he was somebody who understood how to read and write. And they considered that even more important than medicine at this time, to figure out exactly what happened in Nazareth in 0 AD. So, him going down there, figuring out what happened and talking to a bunch of people. And he comes across this story from these shepherds who are out in the fields. And the angel of the Lord comes upon them, shines around them, and they're all afraid. And the angel said unto them, fear not, for behold, I bring you good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people. For unto you is born this day in the city of David a Savior, which is Christ the Lord. And goes on, of course, that's not the only part of this passage, but I had a friend this week, his name's Tyler, love myself Tyler, and he was given a tract. Now, he is a believer already, but within the first paragraph, and I think it was only 2 sentences, and the very second sentence in this tract that was left on his door, it said, did you know that if you are not a believer, that you will burn in hell forever and ever? When we are introducing people to the Word of God, even if we believe that to be true, we should look at the way God introduces God. How is it the way that he says it? And what did they say? There's four parts here that I want to focus on here. Fear not. We are not to make people afraid of our God, of Jesus Christ. When Jesus is here, we are called to not make people afraid. We are told to make them feel safe. The opposite of fear, right? That there's not worry. This is not fear. So we're not to bring people to Christ by fear. That scares them away. We want people coming towards God. For behold, I bring you good tidings. What are tidings? Simply news and information, right? News and information. Now, a lot of times this gets used to be like there's good tidings, means something good is in the air. And if that's how you want to think about it, sure, that's kind of the modern context and applicable to this situation. When you are in a Christian church, is the feeling that you get from everybody, is the news and information good? Because that's what we're talking about. It's called the gospel. It's called the good news. Is the news good? Or are we preaching Christ as bad news? A lot of people preach Christ as bad news and they say, but I'm unafraid of the bad news. That's not what God does. God preaches the good news and wants you to come in when you hear that good news. Good tidings of what? Great joy. Speaking to people's happiness, speaking to people's long-term happiness, right? This is news of joyous. It is worth celebrating, is worth being excited about, being happy. This news, when people hear it, should feel alleviated, should feel happier having heard you, even if they don't believe it, even if they don't know what you're talking about, as in the case of the shepherds in this field, right? They don't know what's going on. And it should make them feel joyous, right? It should make them feel like rejoicing. When we preach the gospels to other people, do they feel like rejoicing after we finish talking to them? Or do they feel put down? Do they feel ashamed? Do they feel a responsibility, an obligation? Do they feel a difficulty, right? If so, we're preaching it wrong. Listen, there's lots of responsibilities, right? But it's good stuff, right? We're preaching good stuff. And then the last part, which I love as well, which shall be to all people. Now, there's a lot to talk about with the shepherds in the field. There's a lot of research that's been done because generally this time of year, most shepherding communities would actually be inside, or at least the Jews would not actually be in the fields at night at this time. They would have brought the sheep in from this time of year. So the people that are out are foreigners, right? These are not the Jewish people. They are the ones who are taking their turn to have the fields from the Jews. And what is this good tidings of great joy? They shall be to all people. I just wanted to tell you, this isn't for just the Jews anymore, right? This is for all people. All four parts of this statement here, like, bring literal tears of joy to my eyes of so much overwhelming happiness. And it is such a shame that we today as Christians feel like hitting somebody with a Molotov cocktail in the face, right? Like, hey, at least they're going to remember us. At least they're going to be talking about us. At least they're going to be what? Listen, I'm familiar with psychological sales tactics, right? There's huge field of psychology about it. Door in the face, foot in the door, whatever. All these manipulative ways to get into people's hearts. And I'm not going to say they're never successful. Many people change their behaviors based on fear, but look at how they live their lives while they're based on fear. We are told that the Pharisees were great at recruiting people, but what did they do? They made people twice as fit for hell as they were themselves. When you get somebody to believe something because of fear, they behave like fearful people. I absolutely see this with the modern Christian movement nowadays in America. When you see the amount of direct anti-biblical teachings that they have embraced in order to push over their politics, it's fear-driven. Fear of immigrants, fear of other faiths, fear of other colors, fear of trans people, fear of Democrats, fear of liberals. Fear of what's going to happen. And they vote like it, and they act like it, and their demeanor is reminiscent of it. These are not fearless people. These are people who are petrified, urinating themselves constantly posting it on social media because they are afraid that they are going to lose. What did the Christians of this time period do? They walked alone sometimes into the middle of these lions' dens of nations where they knew their emperors wanted them dead and would kill them eventually, but their sacrifice would create millions and millions and millions of more Christians because they were regarded so well. They walked into the middle of people where they didn't speak the same language. They didn't share the same cultures. They didn't eat the same food. They didn't have any base belief system with which to appreciate. At least the Jews got like, hey, your God is now this God. Christians went into the middle of places that had animism, Hinduism, different belief systems entirely not based on Christianity. And they experienced unbelievable amounts of success, not by teaching fear, but by teaching love, but by teaching this gospel, which was to all people. This is a proclamation that we get directly from heaven, and we need to keep this in mind every time we are proclaiming Jesus Christ to somebody else. We will see them afraid as the shepherds are afraid. And do we pounce on their fear, or do we comfort their fear? Do we say, no, don't be afraid. I have good news for you. If we are preaching the gospel as bad news, we are not preaching the Christian gospel. And that's what I get out of this. Any of you guys have any thoughts about the gospel of Luke in this one? I'm going to start with Lily here. She says, Luther says we shouldn't fear death because of love, but we should fear God because of his almighty power. Does love negate or precede fear theologically? That's a very deep question here. I will think on that for a moment here. By loving God, we are freed in salvation. Yes, that by that belief is fear. Should be afraid until we believe. I don't see it that way because, like I said, these folks in the field didn't believe in Christ, right? They don't even know to wait for Christ, right? And so I do believe that when we love first, that faith follows, right? That our heart, where our hearts is, our treasure will be, right? So as opposed to when we fear, we're fearing for the treasure, right? We're saying, oh, put your treasure in the right place, invest it the right way. But no, we want to get people's heart in the right place and allow the treasures to follow. Yeah. Anybody else? Any thoughts about Luke and the way the angels are talking to you?
Yeah, no, I'm super excited about the good news, and I portraying it as the good news feels so much better now, having gone through that Reconstruction period. Because when I was on my way out of the Bible, or out of the Christian faith, back in my 20s, it really felt like it was more about control than it was about spreading good news. It was like, come join our organization so that we can control you and get money, siphon money out of you, and dominate you in every way, and force you to abide by our precepts. And it turned me off from Christianity entirely. But yeah, I mean, coming back to it now, that's not at all what the Gospels are about. And you hit upon, a perfect example in the fact that, like, this is one of the earliest examples chronologically. It's not, we've already met Matthew and Mark, but like chronologically, this is one of the earliest examples of Jesus's message being a recipient for all people rather than just the Jewish people. Yeah.
Ben?
If you wonder why I keep looking over my shoulder, there's a storm that's coming in, and it just sounds gorgeous. The thunder and the lightning. I don't know if you can, my noise canceling's you're not hearing it, but it's pretty cool.
Sure.
So, I grew up in a world where if you didn't go out door to door knocking at least once a week, you were not a good Christian. And I always hated door to door knocking. I felt, even as a young person, that we were being very invasive and rude to people. But obviously, I had to obey, or I was going to be in trouble. So, but even as a young man, here I am. I went to Bible college, was studying to be a pastor, and I was, a devout fundamentalist Christian. I started having a lot of doubts in my heart. One of the reasons I did is I started working at Radio Shack, and I actually worked my way up to the top 100 salesmen in Radio Shack out of 30,000 salesmen. I was very good at what I did. I have 20 years of sales under my experience, under my belt. And when you would go to sales meetings, I began to see the comparison of witnessing, soul winning, door to door knocking to people versus sales techniques. And I realized they were the same thing. And one of the things I started questioning that, and I got myself in trouble with pastors. I started saying, this is nothing but sales techniques. And I got myself in some trouble because I've always been one of those people that ask questions, and when I speak my mind, and when I question something, I question it boldly. And I started getting myself in some serious trouble. And I started to ask myself, let me give you an example of real quick of how we do it. Hi, I'm Benjamin Williams from Believers Baptist Church. Can I ask you a question today? If you died tonight, would you go to heaven or hell? that is what we did. Well, I look back now and I just shake my head and go, oh my word, I can't believe we did this. But then we were taught how to do techniques of how to weasel our way, put our foot in the door, literally put your foot up on the door threshold, and ways to you didn't hit the question right away. You did kind of talk to, oh, I see your boat out there. Do you like to go fishing? And we would bait and switch them, and then we would get them to start listening to our spiel, so then we could lead them to the Lord. Now you pray with me, and we're going to get you saved. Well, I realized that the the gospel as we know it overall with evangelical Christianity is not good news. This was a personal thing I came to. It's nothing but fire insurance from hell. It's all about being scared of God because God's going to destroy you and kill you because you're a sinner. So as long as you say, Jesus, save me, I believe in you, then you're not going to go to hell anymore. And that to me is not good news. That's just making God into a narcissistic jackass again. But God's not that way. And so these are these questions I've been torn and pondering for the last several years. And I finally have started to realize that the good news is that God is love and that God is joy and that God is peace. And he didn't save me because of all of the wicked things I did. He saved me because I'm a human being that he saved. And I'll be honest, I'm actually becoming more of a universalist than I am anything. The more I study the goodness of God and the more I study the good news, I personally have become a universalist. And I one of the things I've struggled with that is like, okay, that means my sexual abusers are one day going to be redeemed. But I'm finally realizing that's true. And that even the ones who did so much evil, even Hitler is going to one day kneel and say, Jesus is God. It's going to be profound because I think it requires more faith to be a universalist than it does to be a modern evangelical Christian. It really does. Yeah. But I have become a universalist. So the good news that we would sing the song, good news, Christ died for you. It was none of it was good news. It was just fire insurance and it was a fear-based system. And now I'm not afraid of God. In fact, I have zero fear of God. I actually want to be one with him. And I look forward to being one with him. And the more I grow and the more I'm starting to learn, the more I realize there's nothing to be afraid of. Like when I grabbed my daughter, when I was okay, I'm starting to talk too long. I see the look in Hody's eyes. I'll quit. I'll hurry up.
You're fine. You're good. You're good.
When I first was a dad, I was a strict disciplinarian, and I would now call what I did as abuse. And I understand that now. I've had to make that right with my children. But one day I reached my hand over to my son and he winced and he went like this. And I remember this is not long before my divorce but my heart stopped and I'm like, why are you afraid of my hand? And when now I can put my hand over by my daughter and she has zero fear of me. In fact, she's the boss when we play Minecraft. She's in charge. Then we have so much fun. But my children have no more fear of their dad. They are not afraid of me at all. I don't want them to be afraid of me. But there needs to be a respect of my position as a father. That's where I believe where the fear, we're supposed to, the word fear needs to be replaced with respect and honor. And I think that makes it more understandable. But my child, no matter what they do, I pray that they will never be afraid of me, and they will know that no matter what they do, even if they became a child molester, God forbid, that they know that I would love them unconditionally. Now, obviously, there's accountability, there's boundaries, etc., but my love will never, ever change for them. And that has changed as I have understood the goodness and the love of God in my own life. And that's all just happened in the last couple of years.
That's awesome. I mean, Bray says I second every word Ben just said. I do too. I think anybody who has worn the burden of unforgiveness until you cast it off, it's kind of hard to see it, right? Like
Yeah.
of when you're not. But the I'm a universalist as well. I do believe we all
Really?
go to heaven eventually. Yeah. We had a verse I actually meant to talk about. I think it was a couple weeks back, maybe just last week, but about the guy. I was going to make a universalist point, but Jesus talks about the guy, the debtor who, when somebody owes him money, or he owes somebody else money, and the guy's like, all right, take your time, get it together. And then when he has to get it from somebody else, he like beats them or whatever. And he's like, you owe me money, bro, or whatever. And the debtor's like, all right, well, now I'm not going to be lenient with you anymore. You're not lenient with the people who owe you money. And the man is tortured until everything is rectified and the debt is repaid. So there is an element, like, this is kind of the symbolism of hell, right? That you are there to be refined, but every knee will bow and every tongue will confess. And I'm sorry, as from what I understand, if your knee is bowing in service and if your tongue is confessing that Christ is Lord, do we not tell people that that's what saves them? Right?
Exactly.
Like, and if we're told every knee will do it, that knee
Bingo.
bowing is literally in service. So if we're told everybody's going to serve God eventually, yes, that includes some terrible people. Now, you may want to see them burn for all of eternity. That says more about your heart than theirs, right?
Yeah.
Like, worry about yourself. So yeah, what you just said, love everything about it. Aaron, anything you want to add there?
No, I don't think I can add anything to that.
Yeah. Bray, this is true, Bray. I live in an area where going door to door knocking gets you on the evening news.
Oh,
Yeah.
that's not entirely true. I did have one thing that
Yeah.
I wanted to add, and it's kind of tangentially related to what Ben said. So evangelical Christianity has a lot of different denominations that go door to door knocking, and the type of Christianity that I feel like I want to portray, and I feel like that you portray and everything like that, is very. I want to spread God's word, but I want to do it in a less passive way, because I feel like what we do here is relatively passive, and that we allow people to come to us. Is there a door knocking interpretation of what we do, essentially, or is that inevitably going to be too aggressive and too much of the dominant culture?
I mean, you are right, Aaron. This is something that I've thought about. How do we reach out? And I'll tell you my mindset, but the group is not my group, it's our group, right? Like, anything that people want to do, we do, right? I that's actually why we're having this weekly. I was like, do we want to have a weekly thing? Do we want to have a daily thing? Do we want to, whatever? And this is kind of what was decided. At the moment, I have been allowing people to reach out to other people that they think need the message and bringing them in. Ben is one such person who was reached out to and brought in.
Trisha invited me.
Yeah, by Trisha, somebody who I worked with. And so I am allowing people to kind of reach out for them. Well, allowing, of course, people are reaching out to other people on their own. And some of the people who have been brought in, who have come in, I have reached out to as well as an individual basis. I am kind of trying to establish a good community right now. And that's why we're reading the Bible this year. I felt that was a good ground floor to get started on. That way we all have kind of a biblical knowledge. We've all got kind of it in place. I want to make sure that this is a loving, positive community to bring people in. And then when we feel comfortable with it, and maybe that's today, that we kind of get some kind of program to be like, hey, I see that you are struggling with your faith. I've been doing with this individually, but do I want this to become a collective effort? Absolutely. At the moment, I'm just streaming to my personal page. I don't have like a Love First Christians Facebook page or Twitter account or something like that. That would be something I'd want to do with a group of people if we saw that to be appropriate, or making a website if we saw it to be appropriate. And people are free to share this stuff with whoever they want to at the moment. I don't know when that next step is. I rely heavily on the Holy Spirit to kind of do that. I am excited about this news, and so I do reach out to people individually when it's happening. There's complications, obviously, with group efforts. It's a good thing, I think. organization can be your benefit. It can also institutionalize or systematically make imperfections you have systematic and difficult to remove, right? When you have those kind of problems. Aaron and I recently read a book about the Weather Underground, and obviously they had some systematic issues that prevented them from maybe doing the maximum amount of good that they could have done. And so it's difficult. I don't have an answer for you, Aaron. It is something that I've thought about reaching out as a group, but I'm wanting to get the ground floor there. But if we feel the ground floor is there and we're ready for prime time, I do believe that obviously I can't wait till we're just perfect, right? That will never happen. But if we are in a state that is good, much like with Christ's ministry, when he feels that he is ready and it's time and it's in a state that's good, then we can reach out, start doing some stuff. We've thought before already, doing some outreach about doing some community service, having donations. These are all ideas that have been floating around. I hope everybody listening, that if you have an opinion on this, that you'll join us, talk about it,
Well,
tell me about it.
I find it interesting. One of the things that I've been looking for, I'm just going to share from my personal perspective, guys, is and ladies, that Johanna, by the way, she's from my page.
Oh, really? I saw hi
shared-
from the UK. I was like, you are
yeah,
up
I
late, girl.
shared you on my Rising from Brokenness page tonight. That's what I was doing.
Awesome. Thank
I
you.
won't be able to afford to do that again because I'm just doing the free trial. I didn't realize it cost money.
Oh my gosh.
I'm
Does
on
it?
this
Oh,
early,
gosh.
so yeah, I can't do that.
Okay.
But anyway, I've been looking for I guess I'll use the word affirming because I don't know what else to do. But I've been looking for good God-loving people who want to study God's word that are treating our dear friends in the LG community the way they should be treated, with love and gentleness and kindness. And I believe absolutely there's good Christians in that group. And the other is that that we're not Christian nationalists. I am not. And I visited church after church, and the Christian nationalism is just seeping from the pores of evangelical Christianity to the point where I have denounced evangelical Christianity. I can't do it anymore. I just can't do it. So you guys were like, not that I had a check boxes, but I had some boxes to check. I'm like, okay, are they, politically neutral? In other words, their politics definitely do connect with God's word instead of they make God's word connect to their politics. And that was one of mine. And so yeah, I'm excited to be here. I'm liking it.
Be part of the process. Yeah.
Yeah.
Aaron, where do you think we're at right now? You think we're ready to start reaching out, doing some collective stuff?
I really don't know. It's something that we probably ought to work with the group and, especially the Discord server and, try to figure out where we're at, because I'm just wondering, like, what methods would be the best way to reach people, the question I asked earlier, and I genuinely don't know the answer, is like door knocking, for instance. Like, obviously Love First Christians is almost all online, and door knocking doesn't work so well when you're talking about like a non-physical church. We're not all in one location, so we're not able to physically support one another in the same way the door knockers typically do. But that type of outreach, is that something that's exclusively the domain of evangelical Christians in the sense of like modern Christians, or is that something that we can incorporate an element of? Is that tactic unavailable to us?
I'm against door knocking.
You're against door knocking?
Oh, 1,000% against it.
Yeah.
I think it's rude, inappropriate. I think door knocking is helping your neighbor. You see that their yard needs raked and they haven't been able to rake it because you find out that they're working 100 hours because their spouse is sick. Go rake their yard. That's door knocking.
Sure.
Go. As I'm starting to get a little stronger, I'm disabled. I actually want to go down and start talking to transients and just talking to them. Just yesterday, I got to sit down outside the YMCA and talk to two young men for 30 minutes. I caught them catcalling a lady, And I challenged them, called them out on it, challenged them, rebuked them, and then I lovingly talked to them for 30 minutes. By the time they were done, they were fist bumping me and thanking me. That's door knocking. That, in other words, that's showing the love of Jesus. And I told them, I said, I want to show you guys the love of Jesus. I'm not going to tear you up, tear you down. I'm going to show you the love of Jesus. What we have called door knocking in evangelical Christianity, or what the Mormons do, or what Jehovah's Witnesses do, that's just sales pitch stuff. That's not showing the love of Jesus.
Yeah, I guess door knocking, I was using the word door knocking, but I don't necessarily literally mean just knocking on people's doors, but I mean like proactively entering people's spaces and speaking to them versus the passive, we're doing this thing over here, y'all are welcome to join, sort of aspect. Also, I cannot take you seriously when you keep jumping between like these really deep salient points and then showing off your nipple shirt.
The nipple
Okay,
shirt.
let me show you right here.
Eyes
I
up.
look here. My kids, I wear it just to embarrass my kids.
Bray says you knock doors when you comment on posts, check on friends you haven't heard from in a while, engage in constructive discussion, be the crutch someone can lean on. It does a lot more than knocking and leaving tracts. He also notes that tractates are explicitly forbidden in the Bible. That's ironic. And some really handsome gentleman says, absolutely, Bray. We agree with him. So there you go. I this is something that I think will be good to talk about in the group. I think just some thoughts. I think a focused effort is really good. I think anybody that attempts to recruit like tens of thousands of people either recruits no one, or we have a lot of Christian denominations, including as Ben noted, like Mormons and stuff, that are like, did you know that most of our like church is first generation right now? And that's supposed to be a good sign, but in truth, it's a bad sign because they're losing almost all the old generations because like nobody wants to live that lifestyle, right? Like it's not good. When Ben talks about sales tactics, and I'm glad he studied the psychology behind it. I actually just learned about him when we were reading a book in a different book club recently. These different sales tactics and how they work. It's really great for selling a car. As soon as somebody signs your name and you can dip out, these sales tactics are incredible. As soon as I can get somebody to pray the prayer and dip out, really easy to sell bad Christianity, right? Mm-hmm. But if I'm trying to sell meaningful Christianity, I'm doing something else. And you guys kind of mentioned raking somebody's lawn.
Yeah.
I know for me, snow is always an easy one for me. I like being the big, strong dude. I can shovel everybody's driveway before they wake up. It's a real easy
even
one.
Even in evangelical Christianity, even when you do the door knocking and you lead someone to Jesus, the ulterior motive is to get them into your denominational system. And even the good works that you see within a lot of these churches, they're not done just to help people just because of love of Jesus. They're done to recruit them into their denominational organizational system. What I love is when it's grassroots, when it's just love that begins to just radiate and flow over, and it just attracts people, and it just starts to bring them in on its own.
The reason the reason I keep asking, and I totally get what y'all are saying. I'm already on board with what y'all are saying, but the reason I ask is because I really want to see this sort of movement, not necessarily just the Love First Christians as an organization, but like this type of Christianity become the dominant kind of Christianity. And we got to bridge the gap somewhere between this sort of like super individualistic one-on-one communication and everything like that to something that can be more broad to get more people in, so that we could actually make that social difference, because all this sort of like super one-on-one communication, it's limited by the fact that you Hody as an individual can't be everywhere, like if you're having these one-on-one conversations, that's opportunity cost of like other people that you couldn't meet, and so I'm not trying to make a specific point tonight. Like I'm just talking it over in my head, trying to figure out like what we can do to reach more people.
I think honestly, it's okay to leave it as a question we aren't going to have the answers to here, but at least you put it on our minds.
Yeah.
Let's think about how maybe we can do that. And I think that that's a very noble and worthy thing. And whatever thoughts come to our heads, we'll talk about it. We'll think about it. I did want to show this just because it exists. And here I found the tract itself. Again, the first paragraph. Please do not resent us for giving you this tract. We love your soul, and we want to tell you that if you have never been born again, you are on a journey to a place where you will burn forever and ever.
That's like passive aggressive right there.
And I think the funny thing is either you believe, and so like you're like, well, I already believe, so I'm not worried about this, or you don't believe, and you're like, what a-holes these people are, right? Like there's no, like, this is such bad messaging. Anyway,
There's no self-awareness whatsoever.
Yeah. All right. Well, with the Bible stuff wrapped up, what do you guys what's been on your mind from the news, either of the two of you? Anything on your mind that you would like to discuss?
I'm concerned about President Trump signing the executive order allowing segregation now within the federal entities. And you talk about directly opposite of Christian principles or Bible principles, where it was all over the news today. It started with him attacking DEI, and I know there's good and bad of DEI, but he's now no longer going to ban segregation, and it's like it's like he's doing everything he can to take us backwards, instead of continuing to grow. We're going backwards. I'm just deeply concerned about it.
Yeah. I am just now learning about this, so I am not educated on it. Yeah. No longer requiring an explicit prohibition of segregated facilities in new government contracts. It was filed apparently February 15th, so I've been asleep at the wheel on this one. Still illegal, but the directive from the GSA, which manages federal property and sources contracting options for other agencies, came in response to one of President Donald Trump's executive orders aimed at rolling back diversity, equity, inclusion in the federal government. Here's what to know about that order. We got a little bit about this. So I saw today that the Jackie Robinson exhibit is like with the feds is going to be closing as part of an anti-DEI program. At some point, you're just deleting history, and we need to kind of have a conversation about that. I have a lot of thoughts about DEI. Aaron, do you know much about this specific latest one? You should probably save me here because I don't know about this one specifically.
I was just about to say, when you asked, like, did we have anything to talk about today? I'm feeling so overwhelmed with the volume of new, terrible news that I can't even hardly focus on a single story to talk about. I mean, obviously my mood's still like fresh in my mind, but at that point it feels like ancient news. Like, we're already several Mahmoods later because multiple people are in the exact same situation as him, who have committed no crime, are already being arrested from like just continuing on with the existing policy. So I'm not familiar with this particular executive order. I hadn't even heard the story either. It's the Steve Bannon coined a term, and the term that he coined is called flooding the zone. If you want to find an article about that,
Yes.
And it's basically just put so much shit out into this discourse that people can't focus on anything because there's so much horrible stuff happening. You could just completely drown people in despair, essentially.
It's the same technique Hitler did, and it worked. Now, I'm not calling Trump Hitler. I'm just saying it's the same technique.
Well, I mean, this Steve Bannon just got through doing a Hitler salute just like last week or whatever. So, you know, he followed Elon Musk's example.
So the idea with Bannon, it makes sense that he would follow Musk with his own salute, right? That you give them more of it to the point where you're just like, oh, so everybody's doing a Nazi salute right now instead of just like one person. And so the idea behind flooding the zone is a way to confuse the media, because if you are talking about, if all of us are collectively focused on Mahmoud Khalil and his deportation, illegal deportation, then that's like a serious issue. If you do this to 100 different activists, we don't have one person to kind of coalesce around, and it floods the zone for the media, and it just becomes kind of, I guess, white noise, right? Like that people are just like, oh yeah, more deportations.
Like, yeah,
stuff or whatever.
perfect example. What was that kid that was back during either late Bush or early Obama? I think his name was Elian Gonzalez. Do y'all remember
Oh,
the story?
Clinton. Yeah.
I was under
Was
Clinton. Yep.
That was Clinton. Okay, so much further back.
Bill Clinton.
That was the only story of its type for the longest time. And so everybody in the media and people like had an opportunity to like form a serious opinion on this
I'll
particular
never
story.
forget that picture.
Yeah. Like I feel like this is analogous to Mahmoud in the sense that like it's an immigration based story that, but the difference between it is it was the only story of its type that was like in the public consciousness for weeks, if I remember correctly. Like it was a long time that story was on. Another example would be like Terry Schiavo during the Bush administration.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
The end of life care kind of thing.
Yeah, we got to talk about that for weeks as a public discourse, and that was like the one thing that was going on at that time that we talked
Now
about.
there's so much. It's like, what do you talk about?
There's like
Because it's literally
15
daily.
Terry Shivos a week, like
Yeah.
And now we're in a constitutional crisis because President Trump's administration has defied court orders 3 times now just this week.
Yeah.
And so we are in an absolute constitutional crisis. And I believe he's going to start just basically saying the court's wrong of what he's saying, and he's starting to badmouth them. And I think he's heading for absolute totalitarianism.
It's honestly, we are kind of at a point I thought we would be at the end of 4 years. Within the first 2 months. It's like, to me, it's freaky. Bray mentions this story. I believe I remember this because this is like a mom, right? But a legally documented immigrant who is a specialist in microvascular kidney surgery was deported just because she's a Syrian and in defiance of a federal order halting the deportation. So I mentioned this before, that like the problem with executive orders, as long as you claim to be following them, even if those orders are found to be unconstitutional later, you have protection because you were trying to follow the spirit of that executive order. That enables you to even go beyond the scope of the executive order, as long as you say you're just trying to fulfill the executive order. So all these bad things that are being done, there's going to be no blowback, even though inevitably the courts, after, of course, 3 to 4 years or however long it takes to get a ruling these days, will say, hey, you can't do this. And we've litigated it and whatever. And we're back to the Andrew Jackson days where we're like, hey, let the Supreme Court send their army, right? Like, I don't care. It's bad. It's bad. And ignoring all the judicial restraints, and Elon Musk and Donald Trump have proven this week that they don't understand why the court's ability to restrain them. Forgetting seemingly completely that the courts were completely saving them under Biden. Like, you needed the courts to prevent some of his like tyranny. And so now when it's stopping your tyranny, that you're the one that's like, no, but we have a mandate by the American people. Would you make that argument if the Democrats were doing this? Come on.
And what's wild to
Please.
me is that like the courts have actually come in pretty clutch, considering the fact that they're stacked towards Trump. Like both the lower courts and the Supreme Court are stacked towards Trump, and they're putting out stuff against him, which goes to show the integrity of most justices and judges. Like Amy Coney Barrett, who at the time I thought was just basically Handmaid's Tale, horrible woman. Like she has ruled against Trump several times recently.
She's following the Constitution.
Yeah.
And boy, the Republicans are letting her know it too.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's and that's I think goes to show exactly how monstrous these oversteps are, right? Like these are not. I noted with the Supreme Court justices, the new ones, that they promised they weren't going to touch Roe v. Wade, all of them, and then they touched Roe v. Wade, right? Like it just wasn't true. So these are people that are not above corruption, but there comes a point where like explicitly this is against the law, right? Like very not wormy, not possible to argue otherwise. And they are like, yeah, even we got to say this is.
Well, yeah, I mean, like Amy Coney Barrett is not Clarence Thomas, you know,
Right.
or Alito, you know, like as bad as she is, she's not one of those two, because those two are just so nakedly corrupt that, yeah, they'll go along with whatever.
Sure.
So, you know, so we've got a 7-point justice system where 2 of them are just automatically against you. You know.
Yeah. I mean, you got a few. I mean, obviously the Democrats have a few. I know I cite this all the time. I was reading the deposition from one of the Supreme Court cases where they, now 5-4, they ruled that the gun ban wasn't legal. But I read like from the opposition, you know, the 4 dissenting votes. And they were just like, we know that constitutionally, yeah, we can't really defend it, but people are dying here. We got to do something. And I'm like, that's not.
You're not your job.
It's not your job, right? Like if the Republicans did this, you'd be apoplectic, right? And so, and sure enough, the Republicans, some of them are doing it, and we are appropriately apoplectic about them doing the same thing, right? Like I don't care what the law says. This is what I feel like doing. So yeah, I mean, some of those are still on the court, obviously, which is why I think we kind of see it going. You know, you don't know which way it's going to rule necessarily. I am glad that, yeah, like in the case of the immigrants, it's deporting legal citizens. Listen, there's a way to do it. It exists, but there's like a whole system like around it. There's legal precedents around it. And
something I was going to ask about the kidney surgeon. My last understanding about that, and I'm asking because I figure other people are also similarly unaware. Last I heard, she'd been deported to France with the intention of deporting her to Syria. And I'm wondering, did the French comply with that? Because it would be so awesome if the French were like, yeah, no, well, fuck that. We're stopping it here. And she's welcome here in France, you know? Yeah, rather than deporting her to Syria. Because if I remember correctly, not only was she deporting to Syria, which is bad enough as it is, but like, I want to say she was like a political dissident too. So she could have been like seriously hurt if she'd been sent back to Syria. I'm curious to see if anybody knows if was like the France was the last place she got to be stopped at.
I don't know. I'm looking it up right now and I cannot find it. I'll go ahead and share what I'm looking at right now, but I am not sure here.
I figure Bray might know if Bray's actively, you know, watching the chat.
That's the only time France is mentioned down there. Syria is not even mentioned either. Yeah, the news is a little bit behind on this one. Dude, I tell you what, this is something else that's been concerning for me. He says, I haven't heard any follow-up, so I can't say. We're losing some of these people. Like, we're losing track of where they are, and these are not silent people. So, like, I mean, when you deport an activist, they're going to talk, right? Like, so like, if they're free in Lebanon, they're going to talk in Lebanon, right? Like, I mean, this is not... you know, and the media is looking for them. And the fact that we are losing tabs on some of these people, and like the best we can find is, oh, that plane went to Guantanamo Bay, or that plane went to Syria, or that plane went to France, or something like that. Some of these people aren't even being deported back to their countries of origin, which I don't think is even technically deportation. Isn't deportation like by definition, or at least political definition, back to where you came from?
We are witnessing political prisoners.
Yeah.
Is what's going on.
Well, yeah, I saw something about somebody who had a passport and a visa and everything like that from Canada, and they had their family backing them up, and their, community backing them up and everything like that. It took them a week to find the person. Like, they just been disappeared. and they weren't able to be found for a full week.
Yeah.
And apparently multiple Mahmoud-like activists have been snagged in the last couple of days. So it's not even exclusive to him anymore, his particular scenario, where he's like campus protests, specifically over Gaza genocide.
Yeah. I do want to say this. This is, in one way, I could say that this is not new. This is something that Americans have done. In fact, Mahmoud's lawyer noted that there was like, oh, this crap that immigration officials always try to pull, right? Like saying that person needs to be deported, and the lawyer had experience with them being like, yeah, this isn't valid, right? Like we have tried this before. And I do want to say, like, Obama blew up a journalist with a drone, right? Like that was critical of him. Like this is, in many ways, what we're looking at is not new, but we need to be able to recognize escalations as well as to identify problems that aren't okay just because somebody else did them, right? So like other people have done this before. Okay, we've had illegal deportations before. All right. But we need to be able to still recognize it as bad. And it's not just okay just because now it's the other side doing it. And also recognize when a new escalation is coming about. When there is a new escalation, this is important to note, right? Like all our presidents have dipped a toe since I've been alive. It's funny that each of the last 4 presidents have tried to kick a news organization out of the White House, right? Like, and the news organizations, it's one of the few times you see solidarity. Right, where like CNN will stand up for the Fox News guy, and like and then the AP guy will get kicked out, and like OANN's like, no, I don't know, right? Like this is getting a little bad here, right? And so like there is a point where like, but they keep trying to do it, right? And the fact that they keep trying to dip a toe into this, it's only a matter of time till they succeed, and them succeeding is our complicity. Right, our silence, our tolerance of it. And so, yes, when Obama blew up a journalist, right, like he was correctly derided and chastised, and it probably stopped him from making that a regular tactic going forward, right? Similarly, when we see these type of deportations happen, you may be able to find other administrations that did it, but we need to be able to recognize that it's like, that was still bad. And if you're doing it more, that's a sign that we're pushing the car. And not only is it on like the verge, but it's going over the edge, right? Like, and we need to stop that before it goes over the edge. Political prisoners being held indefinitely at NATO black sites. Yeah, I mean, this is... again, as political prisoner as it get. Aaron, you shared something here, and I will go ahead and attempt to find that here. Statement from Mahmoud in captivity. Is this the one where like his family said he was like teaching people English?
No. So this is a 6-page statement that he just put out recently, talking about his situation and the situation of other people that are in captivity with him. It's pretty profound. I shared it earlier, and so I just wanted to put it on everybody's radar. One other thing unrelated to what we've been talking about, and I know we're closing down in 5 minutes, but I got one more thing I wanted to bring up is town halls recently. Have y'all been seeing this coverage of like, especially Republicans when they're doing town halls lately? Because
I have not.
Okay, so probably a dozen.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Hang on. Some woman who's like, I don't even ordinarily like engage with politics, but isn't deporting somebody who's like legally here, like a real bad escalation, and like everybody gives her a standing ovation, and it's like a right-wing like community or whatever.
Yeah.
I've seen that. Yes. Okay.
Yeah. No. There's that's one of them, but there's a whole bunch of them. I'm trying to find I was trying to see if I could find a good article about it, because man, there's been like a dozen or more like prolific town halls recently where here we go. Now this particular one is a Vosh video, so people might not be interested in seeing it, but I'm gonna drop it in the chat anyway, because this is a Republican a Republican state senator, and he's trying to give a town hall, and he's trying to butter Trump up and everything like that. And his base is just not buying it at all. They're up in arms. And he's East Washington State. And so like East Washington State is very right wing. Like it's not leftist territory at all. And he walks away from the interview, the town hall, being like, I know y'all are all far left in here, but I think my constituents as a whole side with me and President Trump. And the crowd just goes insane because like the whole crowd, you can see the wide shots of the crowd. They're like old white people, like super old white people.
I believe this is a clip from it, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I believe so. Yeah.
Look at the color of skin, look at the age approximation of these people, take them all into, yeah.
Yeah, and this is just like one example of like a dozen recently. This is the right. Yeah, you got the right one that I was talking about just now, because I remember seeing the background there. But yeah, no, Republicans as a whole are going to these town halls and they're pissed. They're pissed about Social Security. They're pissed about like them violating the court orders and everything like that. Like it's actually pretty encouraging to see that like they may have voted for Trump, but they were sold a false bill of goods, and they're waking up to the fact that they were sold a false bill of goods. Like they're becoming aware that Trump lied to them and that they're not getting what they thought that they were going to get. It's unfortunate that they didn't figure it out sooner, but we'll take what we can get.
There's a poll out of Michigan that said 10 of 13 Trump voters said they did not vote for what they're getting. And 1 in 10 regrets their vote and wishes they voted for Kamala Harris. Now, I cannot express how big 1 in 10 is. 10% of people saying, I wish I voted for like the other person. Think about how divided people were on Kamala Harris and Trump. And to say that I voted for Trump and I wish I voted for the other person is bananas, right? Like that is, I'm surprised that that's more than 1 in 20. Like I think 1 in 20 would be a big deal. 1 in 10 is earth-shattering, right? And the fact that 10 and 13 are explicitly saying, hey, this isn't what I voted for. Now, Aaron, you and I, having been in the Liberty movement, are seeing many people who sold out for Trump who are saying this is not what we voted for. So that's a pretty common refrain here. And yeah, it's not, I am glad that at least the people, as divided as we are, can at least understand. Now, a lot of them, if I'm to be very black-pilled about this, I understand a lot of people are like, that's my Social Security. So as soon as I'm getting punished, I'm out, right? And there are a lot of like, we saw the TikTok farmers who had all those that when they realized that what got cut within that first month by Doge was their paychecks, like a lot of their agriculture stuff, they're like, hey, I'm a Trump voter, I'm a farmer, I'm a Midwesterner, and F this. So obviously, like there is some element of they are being hurt directly, and many of us are being hurt directly. I mean, you look at Trump's trade wars, that has impacted everybody who's had to buy any groceries, right?
I thought the leopards were going to eat their faces.
Gray brings up an excellent point here, which is Trump's tariffs have screwed over farmers way more than the Paris Accords. So all that, and look, Paris Accords, climate change, overstepping government, sure. But the tariffs have hurt them much more. Like what has been going on has been, they've been hurt much more by this. And so you get people who are getting hurt, as you say, the leopards are eating their faces. And so some of them are not all that genuine. I will say, though, having watched that town hall, like it's clear a lot of these people actually do still care about their neighbors, right? Like there was a lot of upstanding for the immigrants, which I think is a great thing, right? Like, because you could tell this was not a community, as you noted, Aaron, that has like a ton of them. But they were asking you and I are politically savvy, but they were asking in a very politically unsavvy way. Like you just tell like old boomers trying to put it together. Like, I'm sorry, explain this to me, how you deport somebody who's here legally again. Like I'm trying to figure out like how this is, and no good explanation, right? Like no good explanation. And you could feel this swell in the crowd when there was no good explanation for it.
It's one thing when you're like deporting some sort of amorphous invading force that's coming in 15 states away. You don't really understand it, but it sounds super scary, and your politicians have told you you have to be worried about it. It's another thing when like Jose, the tamale truck guy that you've been buying tamales from for a decade, gets snatched off and like removed because Jose and he's a great guy. Why would you take him? Like it doesn't register to people until it's personal, which is terrifying, but
it's Alex says I'd be awake again by the end of the stream. Well, that's cool. We're glad to have you in your last moments. I'm glad or at least I hope you got home safe. Not dead in a ditch someplace, but we appreciated the moments that we had you for. Aaron, I guess we're at about 2 hours. We've talked politics. I didn't have anything particular news-wise this week. I appreciate you bringing that to my attention. I remember watching the video and for whatever reason, I didn't know that's what you were talking about, but it would be interesting to see if more of these town halls are going around. Social Security is kind of a big deal, and messing with that. Listen, you hate government all you want. I hit a sign on Monday. Alex, don't drive home tired. If you got to sleep, you can sleep in the car. My mom.
I know you're actively trying to wrap it up, but last year when I was driving a school bus, I hit a stop sign once with the school bus, and it was the most embarrassing thing. It was a very tight turn. It was not good.
Did you clip it or crunch it?
I crunched. Well, no, I crunched it. Yeah, no,
I crunched. Okay, I've crunched a tree before. Whole tree. Icy roads, so I could say whatever. But yeah, I remember it wasn't like I was almost turning to miss it. Like my wheels just kept going, and I hit the thing as center as you can hit it, right in the middle of the car.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't hit it with the front of my bus. I hit it with the back, the very, very back, like. It's wide turns and all.
Of course, yeah.
It
stinks.
I just ran the hell out of that.
I'm sorry. It is an embarrassing thing, so I feel you. Cool. Well, Aaron, thanks so much. You've given us a lot to think about during the week here. But as always, I will see you at book club tomorrow.
Sounds good. I'll see you there.
All right, everybody. Hey, have a great week. Have a blessed day. If you want to join the Love First Christians, in the description, I think I even put it in like the title of the video. You should be able to find a link to join us here. We'd be blessed to have you, and especially as we're thinking about how we take our next steps or what those next steps would be. I would love as many opinions as I can on this, especially for people who aren't believers, who would be interested in seeing how reaching out could be done better. So if you have any thoughts on that, please feel free to join us with the Love First Christians. Other than that, hey, everybody, have a blessed week. I will see you all next week.